why was a man convicted of assaulting his wife and child able to purchase a semi-automatic weapon and other firearms legally in America? Devin Kelley massacred 26 people with those guns on Sunday. The U.S. Air Force now admitting it failed to enter his court-martial conviction into a database used in background checks. Authorities in Texas confirmed today Kelley wasn't in the system.
There was nothing in our databases that precluded him from purchasing a firearm.
He is not in any FBI database. We have not had any investigations on him previous to this event.
We also learned today that Kelley escaped from a mental health facility in 2012. The massacre has stirred up yet another debate about gun control in America. It expanded all the way out to South Korea today, where the president was asked this.
I wonder if you would consider extreme vetting for people trying to buy a gun.
You know, you're bringing up a situation that probably shouldn't be discussed too much right now. We could let a little time go by, but it's okay if you feel that that's an appropriate question, even though we're the heart of South Korea. If you did what you're suggesting, there would have been no difference 3 days ago, and you might not have had that very brave person who happened to have a gun or a rifle in his truck go out and shoot him and hit him and neutralize him. Not going to help.
Okay, Greg, get your thoughts and comments on the president's remarks and also the call of the question.
That's always the debate you're going to get in both sides. Good guy with a gun, bad guy with a gun. There are far more good guys out there than there are bad guys. That's why science, it's common sense that you hope that there are more good guys out there and you have them trained. And we'll talk about that later. But I want to take this whole thing in its entirety. This guy fractured an infant's skull. He escaped from a mental hospital. He beat up a puppy. These are all markers of the kind of person who should not be allowed to have weapons. This guy was caught sneaking firearms into his airbase. He was attempting to carry out death threats against his chain of command. We are told to see something and say something. Nobody did anything. How did this guy get a gun? This is the last creature on Earth. This is a mistake that rivals Fort Hood. 26 lives are dead because somebody dropped the ball. This is exactly like Nidal Hassan. They knew that this was a bad egg, and they didn't do anything. They tell us, when you see something, say something, but then nobody does anything because nobody wants to get in trouble. And maybe this was just a mistake, but this is a huge mistake. It costs 26 lives.
Awful. And when you see the rest of the news and developments that have occurred in this case, Dana, when you see escaped from a mental facility, beats animals, fractured his stepson's skull, beat his wife. I mean, it's just horrific. This is exactly the type of person that shouldn't be allowed to have any weapon to do further harm. It's like Greg said, showing tendencies of what you look at classically for like serial killers.
Yeah.
And when President Trump 2 days ago, I guess now in Asia, he talked about it being a mental health issue. But now this is actually a criminal issue. And so then when there are cries of do something, well, do something would be not necessarily pass new laws, but how about just enforce the laws that are on the books?
So true.
Senator Cornyn today actually had to introduce legislation that said, hey, tell you what, it'd be a great idea if everybody that has information on criminal convictions could upload that to the background check system. How about we do that? I mean, if that doesn't pass by a voice vote tomorrow, that's an outrage.
Totally. Jesse, now more time has passed since the horrific murders of these innocent lives. And we're learning more, about this man, about the killer, about his background, and about where the system, failed these families.
Yeah, the Air Force has blood on its hands. And all they had to do was do their job. And they failed. And the Inspector General is now launching an investigation. The Air Force is a great institution, saves countless lives patrolling the skies, but they lost 24 this week. So the guy fractures an infant's skull, chokes his girlfriend, beats her with his hands, kicks her in the belly, and it's only a misdemeanor. That's wrong on the start of it. So second of all, the judge, and his name is J. Wesley Moore, very soft sentence, 1 year. Lockup. It should have been 5 years. Now, if he had served 5 years, which was the minimum for doing something like this, he would have still been locked up and would have not been able to go on the shooting spree. And the 12-month confinement automatically triggers no handgun or rifle purchases. So why was it a bad conduct just charge instead of a dishonorable discharge? If it was dishonorable, which it was, beating infants and women, that should have, again, triggered a ban on purchasing weapons. And then if you caught escaping from a mental facility, that's obviously this guy's a total maniac. So there are already gun control laws and legal remedies in place to prevent this guy from purchasing a weapon. But because of human error and bad judgment, this guy was allowed to go on a rampage. And then for the media to say that this is all about gun control, I mean, that's like shooting first, asking questions later. And if the answer is more gun control, they're asking the wrong questions. There were already gun control laws in place. Right. So they're so out of touch, especially this woman up there asking the president a question, so out of touch with the American people to ask something like that. It really makes me angry. The media's reaction of the recent tragedies, if you just look at it, has been so off base. The Las Vegas shooter. Right. What was the reaction there? Ban silencers? What did that have to do with anything? How about the NYC terror attack? They're talking about Islamophobia. And then you remember what happened with the hurricanes. They're talking about Melania's heels and global warming. It's no wonder they get the moniker of fake news.
All right. Well, that was well prepared, Jesse. I do feel better after that. Yeah, he does. All right. So, one, a couple of issues here. Obviously, the gun control debate, like we said, taking center stage here. You also have then the president's reaction dealing with this issue while he's overseas on a trip and being asked. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, first, I think the president, and it's sad to me to say, but I think so many conservatives just have a kind of knee-jerk reaction, which is we're not going to talk about this, not the best time to talk about it. It's too soon after the tragedy, or I'm overseas, or I'm busy, but I don't want to talk about it. And so that's what it comes off as,
but
very
he answered
defensive.
That question, no?
But I think, I just wanted to respond to something Jesse said. I don't think the media is out of touch when they ask the question of the President of the United States, Jesse. It's like 80% of Americans think we should have universal background checks. And when I'm listening to my colleagues here this afternoon, I think you guys really are making a case that if someone has a history of mental disturbance, a history of criminal behavior, we as an American people should know about it, and we should be able to impose some limits on their ability to access firearms.
There was obviously a mistake. There was a mistake.
No, but I'm saying this is not a question anymore. I mean, this is why I was so pleased with Jesse yesterday when Jesse said, well, we can't agree totally on gun control because you want gun control. Jesse says he doesn't, but we can agree that certain people who are criminals, mentally deranged, should not be able to get guns. And yet, the Congress does nothing. Zero.
You know what could be done? And we talk about locking up people. There is a missing remedy here, and that is institutionalization. When you have a maniac and a monster, we have no place to put them. Over the last 50 years, we've seen a decline of 95% in state-run institutions. We house under 50,000 people who are dangerously or mentally ill, and it is a 95% drop when you factor in the doubling of the population, of the general population. We don't have a place to put these people long term because we've made that a toxic decision. We've made the idea of institutionalization is wrong when in fact it saves lives, and it would have saved this lives if this guy was in a permanent situation or semi-permanent.
There were a number of fails that resulted in 26 lives lost and horrific injuries. Now, last night, two strangers who banded together to stop the deranged gunman embraced at a vigil for the victims. Emotional images of Stephen Williford and Johnny Langendorf hugging one another. Williford is credited with firing the shots that chased off the shooter. He insists he's not a hero, though many feel otherwise.
I'm no hero. I am not. I think my God, my Lord, protected me and gave me the skills to do what needed to be done. And I just wish I could have gotten there faster, but I didn't know. I didn't know what was happening.
All right, Greg, just real quick, and we'll take it around. These are kind of the comments the president was making, though, saying, thank God that someone was armed and stood up.
When you see an act of heroism, you question whether you can do that. The answer is yes, you can do that if you are trained, because when you're trained, it's a reflex action. It's born of training. This is the first and only time that he has ever been in this situation, and he responded to the situation perfectly. Why? Because he was an NRA certified. He was trained in this. We talk about the solution of hardening soft targets. You harden soft targets through the training of individuals. In Israel, Israel, when there are terror attacks, they advise citizens there to arm their houses because there are people with knives that come to their houses. They train the population to respond to threats. That was a man who didn't have to think, and that's why he responded heroically. That's why, even though he was terrified, it was ingrained in his skull of what to do.
Unbelievable. And that's makes the case and makes the point for proper training and education, arming yourself with the information about weapons as well. Good, Dana.
And also, I think what he's talking about is his faith and how his faith guided him, that he doesn't think of himself as a hero. Obviously, we're all going to disagree with that, but I can understand where he's coming from. He is saying, I had this capability and these talents because God had provided that to me, and he had me there at the right place at the right time, and I wish that I could have done more. And it's not easy to talk about your faith, especially when it will be ridiculed by so many. And so I admire him for being willing not only to talk about that terrible day, but to share with America and the world that he actually believes that it was God that was guiding him.
Yeah, a very impactful lesson, Jesse, when he talks about his faith guiding him and giving the courage, and that he had the wherewithal and also the training to be able to jump into action.
And I said that the media was out of touch, Juan, because they were bashing the NRA, and guess what? As you would like to say, it was an NRA-trained member who ended up saving lives that day. Also out of touch because they're calling for more gun control, yet I think 3 gun control laws were broken and not enforced. So it's not about having more gun control. We already have great gun control in this country, but people didn't enforce it. People were sloppy, and a judge made a very lenient sentence. It was personal error, institutional error, and that's why you saw this tragedy.
Well, it should have been charged as a felony instead of a misdemeanor, and then there was a sentencing fall down too. Juan.
Well, I think the president was asked specifically a question that would fit what you're saying, Jesse. He was asked, would you back extreme vetting for anyone who wants to get a gun in the United States? He then ran away from the question. But what you're saying is we need to extremely vet these people to make sure mistakes aren't made and to make sure people who are mentally incapacitated or disturbed.
We have extreme vetting, but the vetters failed.
Excuse me.
We don't have.
The big argument in gun control in this country is about universal background checks. So we do not have even close to extreme vetting. As President Obama said, we need a right to life argument here, which is to say you should be able to walk the streets and feel safe in your church without the thought that, oh, my God, there's so many guns. Anybody could walk in here or put more guns in the church.
Never would have happened.
Yeah, put more guns in the school, more guns in the church, more guns at the Vegas concert, more guns everywhere. Are you guys totally selling out to the NRA?
But
the entire country.
And Kimberly, we're probably going to find out that the FBI is having a hard time getting into his phone.
Yes.
We do know that he was texting to his mother-in-law and to his father, so we will probably find out more. But I'm imagining that basically one of the things we're going to find is that you have family members who know that they are involved with a very dangerous individual, but what is their recourse? What are they supposed to do in order to help prevent something, which is what Greg was talking about?
Speak up.
That actually would be something useful to talk about, not just on mental health, but also how do you incapacitate somebody who has the wherewithal to do it, and if the family member is worried, it feels like the only thing we can do is after the fact.
But they
especially for women and children.
I think they have to report. They have to stand up and say, you know what, I'm going to call the police and the authorities. You can love a family member.
Not easy to do.
No, I know you can't condone
this guy
kind of violence.
should have been locked up.
Right.
But you can't put him in. If you can't put him in prison, there has to be in state-run facilities. We have to start thinking about this again. It got a bad rap, but it's time.
All right. Well.